What is up, guys? If you have watched my last few videos, you will know that the Porsche has been getting some work done to it again lately. Finally got the cooling system all sorted, as well as the charging system, so essentially I'm ready to tune it. It's making a couple weird noises, but I'm not too worried about that now. I just sort of want to get it, get like a base map on it so that I can drive it at least a little bit and then start figuring out what those noises are. Basically, it's just like a whistling noise at about 1500 to 1700 RPMs or so. So I don't know what it is. I'm gonna pull the belt off the alternator and see if it's the alternator making that noise, because I haven't really changed much on the car since last time it ran. So there shouldn't be any reason why it's making that noise. It could also be potentially like a really loud vacuum leak. I don't know, we'll see. But I have to have a computer to tune it, obviously. And as you guys have seen, I have a laptop, just a cheap little crappy one that I've kept in the shop to do all my tuning and stuff on. And last night I was messing with it and the motherboard took a crap, which is just awesome, because basically that laptop is so cheap, it's cheaper to just buy a new cheap laptop than it is to buy a new motherboard, unfortunately. So I'm heading to the local university, the CSU Surplus, which is where I buy all my cheap computer stuff, because they basically have used computer parts from the university and used computers for dirt cheap. So I'm gonna see if they have another one for cheap. Sometimes they only have nicer stuff, but when I don't need anything very nice, I mean, it doesn't take much to run the tuning software, so don't need anything special. I've got a universal charger, luckily, so I know that I can charge it pretty much no matter what. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead in there and see if they've got something so that I can keep on making progress with this car. See, I still have to spend money even when I'm not buying car parts. It's awesome. You gotta love project cars. Alright, we're back at the shop. I had no luck finding a computer. They didn't have anything there currently. That was sort of in my price range that I wanted, just more expensive stuff and then really, really crappy cheap stuff. So I've got an idea, and it's a little bit crazy and it's a little bit stupid, but it's gonna be cheap and hopefully it should work. I mean, there's no reason why it wouldn't work. It's just gonna take a decent amount of effort. So if you saw one of my past videos, I was working on this car, pre-smashed, putting a timing belt and a clutch in it. Well, the owner's kid wrecked it right after I fixed it, and he's letting me sort of take whatever parts I want off of it, just because he's scrapping it. So, this has a wiring harness and an ECU that will power an EJ22, the engine in the Porsche, perfectly fine without tuning it or anything. So currently, I am tearing the shit out of the interior, ripping the dashboard out so that I can pull the ECU and wiring harness out. And the idea is that I'm going to ditch the Mega Squirt for now, just for now. So I'm going to pull out this wiring harness. I'll keep it for the future, for future plans, because there are future plans beyond just an NA EJ22. But then run the wiring harness and ECU out of this so that I can just drop it in, which I know I can't just drop it in, but just, you know, put it in here and have it run and drive reliably without having any tune issues. So, tearing apart the interior of this thing and ripping the wiring harness out. Alright, I'm not recording most of this because it's sort of tedious and boring. Basically, I'm just tearing everything out. There's the entire heater system, condenser, heater core, blower motor, dashboard, and then I took out the brace across the bar, or across the front as well. It's out there. Whew, I'm out of breath. I'm just ripping this thing apart. So as you can tell, the interior is pretty much completely stripped out. There are these two big grommets here, the one behind here and then this one. That's where most of the engine components, like the plugs, are. So I gotta go unplug those from the engine side. I also need some of this harness. It looks pretty daunting, but most of this is going in the garbage. Most of it's unnecessary. I mean, I have this cable which is coming up off the ECU, so obviously that is being kept. All of this stuff is being kept, but most of this is going in the dump, as well as all this garbage, because like that's cruise control, that's all ignition stuff and accessories, fuses, that all goes in the garbage. So yeah, I'm gonna start pulling all the plugs off the engine itself. And then start pulling that harness out and getting this harness completely out of the car so I can start trimming it down. So I am at my apartment, and this is not wanting to focus on my face. There we go. I'm at my apartment. It is super early. I stayed up till like 3 a.m. last night working on the harness. I just brought it here since I didn't need to be at the shop. I just woke up and I just wanted to show you guys how far I got on the harness last night, which here is what is remaining of the harness. It looks a little bit messy now. I need to go buy some wire loom and loom it all together. But this is essentially all the engine connectors, along with those as well. And then that runs through over here. We've got the starter cable here, igniter, which is going to be mounted next to the ECU. That's why I have it down here. My cat, some relays right there, and then my ECU connector and OBD2 port there. So it's pretty simple. It's just one linear path. This cat is freaking out, but you can tell I made a huge mess last night, and this one does not help. But those are all the connectors and stuff that were cut out of the harness. That's about 99% connectors, and then like one relay and what are you doing? One relay and a fuse box, and then this is all the wiring that was cut out. So I'm pretty sure I cut out more wiring than I am keeping. So I'm gonna try to keep most of the longer wires and you know, like wrap them up and save them for future use, because it's perfectly good wiring. It's just sort of messy. So I'm gonna go get some wire loom and stuff, and I'm going to there's like 1 or 2 connections that need to be soldered in here, but after that it's a pretty straightforward install. I've got some stuff I've got 2 spots that need to go to ground. This needs to go to ignition on 12 volts, and this needs to go straight to battery. Another ground over here. And then that's pretty much all that needs hooked up in the car, actually, besides like the fuel pump and stuff. And then I'm gonna have to figure out, hey, stop it. Biting on my harness. Need to figure out something for the VSS, the vehicle speed sensor, since it'll go into limp mode without that. However, that's not that big of a deal for now. It'll just limit me to 4,000 RPMs, but I think I have an idea for it. And then I have to hook up the oil pressure switch. That'll go to the light, the oil pressure sort of dummy light. Is fuel pump, and then this is for the water temp gauge. So that should be able to go straight to the actually the factory water temp gauge. And then I have another wire in here, and this will be able to go to the factory tachometer, which is cool. So I'll actually have a working tachometer. Yeah, so I'm gonna go get some wire loom and such, and then tape this together, finish the connections, and bring it to the car and start ripping the other harness out of the car. Here is the harness pretty much finished. We've got, I'm just gonna go through like the connectors and stuff real quick. I've got a OBD2 port next to the actual connector for the ECU, and then I have my igniter here. I relocated it out of the engine bay, so it's going to sit in the trunk with the ECU and the relays and stuff. Got my relays. Test connectors are tight against the there's these down here, tight against the harness. And then this is the what do they call it, select diagnostic port, some sort of diagnostic port that's specific to this era Subaru. And then we come over here, And I've got a few loose wires because I don't know how long they need to be. So I've got my main battery, main power, and then these are just a couple of grounds that need to be trimmed down once it's in the engine bay so I know where they ground to. This is for the VSS, so I have just left it undone because I don't have a VSS yet. I have to come up with some sort of solution for that. This is for the starter. And then right here, let me grab them all. Those are two of the engine plugs as well, or sorry, one engine plug and then the two oxygen sensor plugs. Here is another engine plug and then the third engine plug right there. So those are all the engine plugs, and then we have the pressure sensors and the MAF sensor. And then right here I just have some little connectors going to fuel pump, tachometer output, ignition on, 12 volts, and then got our water temp and oil pressure switch. So that's everything there. Yeah, pretty simple actually. I mean, look how small the harness is now. Nice and clean looking. It's going to mount in the trunk and look awesome. This is the pile of wire that came out of it, most of it at least, without the connectors. So I sort of hung on to it so that I had wire to basically attach to this if I need to lengthen anything. So I'm going to start tearing the wiring out of the car, as well as so the intake manifold is going to have to come off of the not the WRX, the Porsche. But that's pretty simple. The intake manifold will have to pop off, and then I will remove all the wiring from basically the whole engine bay. And then I'm going to be pulling this intake manifold off, mounting that on there, just because this one has some connectors, sensors that I had deleted to use with the Mega Squirt, like the IACB. It also has the coil on it, and I also just need this whole engine harness because I don't have one on the Porsche. The one on the Porsche is completely handmade. So I'm going to start ripping the wiring out first thing out of the Porsche, and then I can start swapping intake manifolds. So the engine bay is looking beautifully clean with no wiring in it. And let me just walk over here. Mega Squirt harness is completely out. There's the Mega Squirt harness, and there's the new harness. So as you can tell, the new harness is actually a lot cleaner than the Mega Squirt, and like smaller, more minimalistic, I don't know the word, but a lot more simple. But this also doesn't include the engine harness, but the engine harness tucks away completely under the intake manifold, so that's sort of why this one has so much more crap on it, is because it has the engine harness as well. So I'm just going to tear the intake manifold off now. It's just 8 bolts and the 2 fuel lines, so it's super simple the way I have it set up now. I'm going to take the alternator off while I'm at it to see if I can possibly run a Subaru alternator now that I have the Subaru harness. Might make it a bit easier. So basically I'm just going to strip it down to a long block and start swapping everything over. Alright, the engine is almost fully stripped down to where I need it to be. I need to take off the coolant crossover pipe because that one's modified. It has a different sensor in it. Then basically the hole is tapped bigger, so it needs to be removed and put the factory back one back on rather. And then I need to get the crankshaft pulley off because I've got to go under the timing cover, take the timing belt off, and switch out that sprocket. If you guys remember, in order to get Mega Squirt to work with the Subaru, I switched out the stock crank sprocket that the crankshaft position sensor reads with the one off of a WRX because it has more teeth, so it can run off of just a crankshaft sensor instead of a crankshaft and a camshaft sensor. With this setup with the factory ECU, we're going to run both, but I need to go back to the other sprocket. Relatively simple to do, but just that's why I'm doing that. So I'm gonna pull the coolant lines off first so that it can drain, so that the radiator hoses aren't in my way, and let you know, the water drain out of the top of the engine. At least I'm not going to drain the whole system because it's a pretty big system, and then I can put that sprocket back on. Whew. So this is the WRX or Turbo Subaru or newer Subaru crank sprocket. This is the one that's going back on. This is a 36 -2 -2 -2 style. This is like a 6/7, I think is what it's called. And these just slip on and slip off. If they're sort of stuck on there, then you can try prying on them. Just don't pry on the teeth because they'll snap right off. They say not to pry on them at all, but if you're careful, basically if you try to pry on it and it doesn't come off, then don't pry on it anymore. But a lot of times you'll stick a screwdriver behind it or whatever, pry tool, and it'll just pop right off, like no effort. So gonna throw the timing back together with this guy on there, and I think this was the one that was on there originally actually. And then pull all the manifold and everything off of there and start running wiring. It's getting close. In order to get this to mount in the Porsche, all I have to do is take the fuel lines and flip them, because the fuel lines come out of the other side of the Porsche than they do in the Subaru. But there's this little flange here that I believe the fuel line's bolted to originally, but I need to cut this section off because now it interferes with those fuel lines, and it is keeping them from bolting on basically, so they won't go back together. So I just have to cut that off, and then they'll just bolt on. Super simple. Super easy. I am sort of just working real hard now. I know I haven't been filming a ton of stuff for this video, but I've just sort of been busting ass trying to get this done as quick as possible. And with the wiring harness, I didn't really want to film a whole bunch of it because I was really focusing on not screwing it up because I only had one try, you know. And I didn't really know what I was doing. I mean, it's the first time I've ever done that to one of those harnesses. I found an amazing series on YouTube from this guy named Bussaroo. It's a guy who puts Subaru engines and Volkswagen buses. Check it out if you need any help. It is literally like the most helpful channel ever when it comes to this stuff. It's a smaller channel, probably about the size of mine, but I had never found it before, and finding it is like, that is one of the most valuable resources you could ever have. So shout out to that guy, he is amazing. Thank you so much to, I don't know your name, Bussaroo. So yeah, if you need help, check that channel out, but I'm gonna get this thing cut off. Easy. Ain't nothing caught on fire. I'm sort of just going insane on this car without recording much. But there I have the intake manifold on. I have both the brackets for the alternator on. That's the Subaru alternator that is also on there. Whew! Jeez, every time I turn the camera on I'm out of breath because it's the first time I stop moving for like 5 seconds. The intake is on there as well, the actual rubber intake, and it actually fits perfectly, just barely clears. And the whole PCV system is connected, all the wiring is connected to everything in terms of the engine harness, besides the spark plug wires to the spark plugs themselves. So my next step is going to be basically throwing the wiring harness in. It's going to be in here, going through that hole right there, and measuring everything out, connecting the wires. Let's see what I need to connect. I want to connect just the things that are necessary for now. So this one is going to be ignition on, which I'm probably going to put that on a switch somewhere for security reasons. Fuel pump, that is important. Let's see what else we got. We got starter, that'll be nice and easy. Battery and grounds. And then what else is in here? That'll be everything in here, because the other ones are tack output, oil pressure switch, and water temp, which are all sort of unnecessary right now. And then I'll have to go grab, make sure not to forget this, because I'm not sure if it'll start without them. Pressure sensors off of here, and mount those in the car. But we won't have oxygen sensors for now, and our gauges won't be showing tack. We won't have an oil pressure gauge or switch, light, dummy light, and we won't have water temp, and we won't have a VSS, but none of that matters right now. I just want it to hopefully fire. That would be super awesome. So, I guess we could start throwing this in. I also need to go to the store. You can see I'm making a huge mess by working frantically. I need to go to the store and buy a new belt because, as you can see, I'm back to the Subaru alternator and it's center mounted now, which means the belt is way shorter. So I gotta go get a new belt. For that, I gotta measure it and then go to the store and grab one. But that's not important for now, and I'll start without an alternator, obviously, so let's just get to wiring. For the pressure sensors, on the passenger side, there's like a little bracket built into the car, and I just took the bracket off of the Subaru, and actually the bolt from the Subaru that holds that bracket on is the same exact threads required here. So you just unbolt it from the Subaru and bolt it into the Porsche. It's like it's supposed to be there. It's awesome. The mass airflow sensor will just sit right there. Don't even have to do anything. That fits perfectly. This wire is going to battery. So I think I have everything hooked up that I need to for it to start. I guess let's turn the ECU on. I've got it on a switch and see what happens. Fuel pump primed, that's a good sign. Get a shot. Oh, yeah! Oh, I have no throttle cable. Yeah! Oh my God, so good. I'm so stoked. Send a video to my dad. So it runs like really perfect, which is awesome. It was blowing out a bunch of smoke because I think it was never firing on one or two of the cylinders, which I don't understand. I don't know if that coil was bad or what was going on. It obviously wasn't firing on at least one of the cylinders, but the exhaust was all full of like unburnt fuel and oil and garbage. It was super nasty, so I was burning all that out. And why I think it wasn't firing on two cylinders is because one of the exhaust pipes was all covered in oil and it wasn't burning any of it off. Now that it's running on, you know, fine, all that was smoking and burning off. So I don't think that exhaust pipe was ever getting hot because it wasn't combusting. So now I'm gonna go measure for a belt for the alternator and go pick one up. Oh, what a long day. So the auto parts store didn't have what I was looking for, but I got one on order, a belt, drive belt, so that should be here in just a couple of days. I got a smaller one, like a 4-rib instead of a 5-rib, so I can still mess with it a little bit, but I'm going to end this video off now because I am exhausted. I got up early this morning. Well, I went to bed at 3 a.m. last night after working until then, got up super early this morning, got here right away, and worked my ass off all day to get that thing going, and I am completely satisfied with the progress I made. This is by far the best car, by far the best the car has ran ever by like a long shot, and it's like really close to like being totally fine driving on the road. So I need to button up a few things, make sure the charging system works with that Subaru alternator, and basically I can take it on the road and see what starts to break. I also need to go get it registered, so that's sort of important. But look out for videos soon. Should be driving videos here in the next couple of days because I'm gonna be driving it, so I'm super stoked. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more of this thing, and like the video if you liked it. Thanks much. Peace out.